Everything is possible for one who believes, still more for one who hopes, even more for one who loves, and most of all for one who practices and perseveres in these three virtues. Hello and welcome back to this special retreat where we are trying to develop the habit of being perpetually in the presence of God. I am Aneel Aranha and I'm your guide on this retreat. I hope that you have been connecting with God since we last met. I also hope that you have downloaded the book by Brother Lawrence on practicing the presence of God and have gone through it. I would like to read something from that book to you. This is from chapter 1, para 1 of the Spiritual Maxims, and I want to show you how to dig deep beyond the surface. Listen. Lawrence writes, "Everything is possible for one who believes, still more for one who hopes, even more for one who loves, and most of all for one who practices and perseveres in these three virtues. Everything is possible for one who believes, faith, still more for one who hopes, hope, even more for one who loves." Faith, hope, love. Paul said something similar in his letter to the Corinthians. "And now faith, hope, and love abide, these three, and the greatest of these is love." Let us think about each of these in turn and think deep. What is the faith we need to have? Hebrews 11:6 says that without faith it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. 1, that we believe that he exists, and 2, that he rewards those who seek him. We all believe that he exists, and we all are seeking him, at least through this retreat, so he will reward us. But who is God? Do you believe he created the universe with billions of galaxies and trillions of stars and planets? Yes, that makes him a great God. Do you believe that he's omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent? That makes him a God who is all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-present. Do you believe that he is holy, that he is perfect, that he is without malice, without any trace of evil in him, that he seeks our good? Yes. Do you believe that he loves you and that his love is unconditional, infinite, and immense? Yes. We don't need to accept this blindly. We know that he loves us so much that he sent his son Jesus to die for us so that whoever believes in him may not perish but have eternal life. So, here is a question, and I want you to reflect upon it through the day. If we suffer, if we go through struggles, difficulties, pain, temptation, loneliness, isn't it because it is allowed by God who is all-powerful? And if we believe all that we just declared, then why don't we trust that if God has permitted it, then he must have a pretty good reason for it? It is really important that we understand this because it is key to remaining in the presence of God constantly. Like Lawrence says, we must believe that it is advantageous for us and pleasing to God to sacrifice ourselves to him, that it is normal for his divine providence to abandon us to all sorts of trials, miseries, and temptations for the love of God and for as long as he likes. Without this submission of heart and mind to the will of God, devotion and perfection cannot endure. I have lost count of the number of times when somebody has come to me and said they don't believe in God anymore because God is not doing what they want him to do. What is the faith that they had? Not in the God we just described, but a God who's basically a servant who does what we tell him to do. He doesn't know anything, so we have to instruct him. Shocked? We're going to discover a lot of truths that will shock us, but I hope in a good way. Because once we discover what real faith is, it will liberate us in ways that we cannot even begin to imagine. And when we are able to live in this faith, God will bless us also in ways that we cannot begin to imagine. And that brings us to hope. Hope in what? Well, salvation for one. Paul in his first letter to the Thessalonians speaks about wearing the helmet of salvation, which is the hope of salvation. Translated from the Greek word elpis, it means the confident expectation of salvation. But there is also the hope of the reward that is available to those who seek God in faith. And what is this reward? That despite trials and suffering and pain, or perhaps because of it, we know that good will happen. How can we say that? Because we know, as Paul writes to the Romans, that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called to his purpose. Now, your love for God has drawn you to make this retreat, to which God has called you for his purpose. And there will be rewards for you. And one of the rewards, before you start thinking about Ferraris and condominiums in Paris, is friendship with God. What an awesome reward that is. And that is what happens when you are constantly in the presence of God. And now we come to love. As I said yesterday, love is key to this entire exercise. We do things because of love, and the greater the love, the greater are the things we will do. You have love for God. I just said that this is what has drawn you to making this retreat. I still don't know how many days I will be conducting this. Perhaps 7, perhaps more. But if you travel further after this retreat is over, beyond what you learned from me, beyond what you learned from Brother Lawrence, to what you can learn from God himself face to face, that is going to take a lot more love than you might have right now. So how do you get this love? There are no rules. I want to share an experience. A couple of months ago, I was making a retreat of my own, and I went to this little town of Coimbatore in India. It was a lovely place, smack in the middle of tea plantations, but all around, on all 4 sides, was dense forest, real forest. There were bears and bison and all kinds of animals. And one day when I went for a walk, I felt tired and I sat down on a rock to rest, and I saw this little flower, one solitary little thing growing in the middle of the grass. And it suddenly struck me that God had reached out his hand and given that flower to me. Why? Because nobody would ever see it growing there in the middle of all this greenery. And I suddenly looked up and looked around, and everything seemed different. I looked at the trees, the sky, the birds, and had this strange epiphany that it was all for me. It had to be. There wasn't anybody else there. And then a breeze picked up from nowhere, and it almost seemed like God saying, it is all for you because I love you so much. That was my experience, and it was very profound. But you can have your own, and you begin by telling God to show you how much he loves you. He wants to show you, and he will if you let him. And he can do it in a million different ways. All you need is an open heart and some faith and hope. Before this journey is over, he will show you that he loves you, I promise. Although don't expect it to be in the manner that you imagine. God doesn't like to be predictable, but tell him to show you, and he will. I told him to show me. I was very lonely when I went for the retreat. I was struggling with a lot of things. And not only did I need some rest, I also needed some answers, and God gave me both. I had a wonderful priest for a guide for the few days, and I would like to dedicate this retreat to him. He was there, and not only did he help me get through what I was going through, he introduced me to living constantly in the presence of God. And when he was talking about it, I remembered it was something that I had already known. I spent the first year after my conversion totally in the presence of God. All I did was think about him morning to night. I loved him so much. He would talk to me and tell me things, and then I started to talk to others and share what I was learning. And pretty soon, you know what happened? I was talking more than I was listening. It happens to the best of us and to the priests making this retreat. I know there are quite a few of you. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. But once I realized it, I just said I'm going back to being in the presence of God at all times, and I did. There were so many new insights that I got from Brother Lawrence, which I am sharing with you. I was fortunate that I was in this particular place that really lent itself to being with God always. But I decided I was going to remain with him regardless of where I was. And although there were times when I did stray away, I always found my way back quicker each time. The best thing about this entire journey is that it is without guilt or fear. If you can't do something, you don't beat yourself about it. You just turn back to God, say, sorry, hey, I forgot about you, and be a little more determined not to let yourself be distracted the next time around. With his help, of course. Don't forget this. It is all about what God is going to do in you. I would like to remind you of something that Paul wrote to the Ephesians. For by grace you have been saved through faith. And this is not your own doing, it is the gift of God, not the result of works, so that no one may boast. That's Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 to 9. Salvation is the gift of God. We can't do anything to earn it. And the reason is so that we can't boast that we had anything to do with it. So having been saved by grace, what makes us imagine that God will let us boast now? And then Paul continues, for we are what he has made us, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand to be our way of life. We are going to do good works, many good works, but only through him, which is why even the virtues that we are going to learn to cultivate during this retreat, like faith, hope, and love, are all through him and him alone. We can't be good on our own, no matter how much we might want to. Jesus himself says, if you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. Tomorrow we will talk more about that. Today, what I want you to do is to look for signs of God around you that he loves you. There are signs, literally thousands of them, but we need to be able to see them and recognize them for what they are, the great love of God. Tell God to open your heart to these things, and whenever you discover a sign of his love, tell him in the moments that you talk to him, and then respond to his love and how you'd respond to love from anyone. Say, I love you too. Let's do this in song now. This time I want you to sing along. It's a simple song and it won't take you too long to learn it if you don't know it. The words are on the screen. Let's sing. I hope you enjoyed that. Today, I also want you to keep singing this song of love, or another song if you prefer. The practice of the presence of God as an exercise in love. For those of you who still think this is not possible to think about God all the time, I want to give you something to think about. Have you ever been in love? Please say you have. Okay. When you're in love with somebody, do you know how often you think about the person? It's all the time. You could be watching a movie or TV, or you could be engrossed in manual labor or walking in the park. No matter what you're doing, your thoughts constantly move towards this person. Isn't that true? You're constantly wondering about how that person is and what he or she might be doing. Every now and then you'll pick up your phone and message him or her, and sometimes the messages aren't important enough. You want to hear that person's voice, and sometimes even that isn't enough. You want to meet the person, and this is what you do when you're in love. Well, being in the presence of God constantly is simply about being in love with God, love with Jesus. We will talk more about this soon. I will see you again tomorrow. Until then, may God be with you.